Hey everyone, welcome to Hit the Apex podcast. It's Jawad here as always. Thank you very much for joining me this week. It is the middle of the final doubleheader for Formula One this year, heading into the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix this weekend. Our last race, 22 races this year or 23. Pretty sure it's 22. But I'm sure someone will correct me on that one anyway. It's been a long season, but also feels like it's gone so quick, given the fact that the championship itself petered out towards the back half of the season. Not even just as we got to the midway stage of the season, it all was done and dusted with Max Verstappen. But we still have a race to go. We've got a race to talk about from the weekend, the São Paulo Grand Prix. And it was a sprint weekend as well. Sorry, just trailing off there. It was a sprint weekend as well, which was exciting. And actually was an exciting sprint race. I don't mean to just be saying it as if I'm reading off a script, but I think it probably was the best sprint we've seen so far. We've had 6 now in total. Bit about that later, but we'll talk about some Abu Dhabi Grand Prix as well. Gee, I just lost. This is going to be fun. So I've just started a new job this week after 7 years working for one company and also 5 years in the same location. So now I'm turning in my Monday to Friday 9 to 5 person. And I still want to keep recording on Thursdays. So you might get a more tired version of me on a Thursday evening here recording now. So yeah, that's big news, big change in my life. But yeah, we'll talk about Abu Dhabi as well in a sec, and then of course some MotoGP to round things off because they had their championship wrap up a couple of weeks ago now. But anyway, let's get it into the São Paulo Grand Prix review. Again, not the Brazilian Grand Prix like some people say, but it's the São Paulo Grand Prix. And Mercedes at last get their win, their breakthrough win for 2022. Who would have thought that coming into this year that we would have had to wait to the second last race of the year for Mercedes to get a win? But such has their season been, with the design of their car not really suiting the regulations and just, putting them backwards. But they've been strong otherwise. They've been one of the standout teams for me this season, and I think a win for them was needed just to kind of cement how well they've done. Compare that to Ferrari. Ferrari's got the fastest car, but absolutely have no idea how to execute a strategy or get their reliability right, whereas Mercedes, they just have that consistency from the drivers. They have, the ability on the pit wall to make great decisions as well. Sometimes you might criticize them for being conservative on strategy, but they know how to execute more than the team in red do. And it was a maiden win for George Russell as well. So George Russell, finally a race winner in Formula One. I'm sure there would have been a lot of sad people over the last year since the Sakir Grand Prix when he, deputised for Lewis Hamilton when he had COVID, and he was looking good to take a win there, but ended up having reliability problems and the Mercedes pit crew letting him down. How ironic. But no, it was a good result there for George, and a 1-2 finish for Mercedes as well. So how does that, shape out in terms of being a statement for 2023? They all seem pretty confident that next year they can be fighting from the outset, so Red Bull have kind of gone unchecked this season, so you kind of want, or we all kind of want to see a team like Mercedes hold Red Bull accountable, and particularly with all the other political stuff and, rumblings going on, the cost cap and all that. I think, a team like Mercedes would do well to challenge them again and give us a fight, between Hamilton and Verstappen and even Russell if he can get in there again. So Russell won the sprint on Saturday as well, so he started from the top spot. I can't say pole position because pole position is whoever is fastest in qualifying on the Friday, so you can't say that Russell started from pole because in the history books he didn't have pole. So he started from grid slot 1, let's say, but that's such a mouthful. Grid slot 1, and Mercedes were on song all weekend. Their pace was great. But let's wind things back to qualifying first, because we had another first-time result with Kevin Magnussen and the Haas team getting pole position. Yeah, imagine waking up on a Saturday morning and reading that. And you're like, what exactly went on? So apparently Kevin had set a blistering banker lap, at the start of Q3. He couldn't even believe it, and his team couldn't believe it. Then we had a red flag come out because George Russell binned his Mercedes, and then the rain came as well, so no one was able to improve on lap times later, and, pays to do a banker, and, to nail your banker as well, as Magnussen did. So good job for Kevin Magnussen. Unfortunately, in the sprint race, he went backwards, as you would expect, with the pace of the cars behind him, so he at least fell back to 8th, to score 1 point in terms of the sprint results and the points that you get for finishing in the top 8 for the sprint. Then in the Grand Prix itself, Russell led from the start. We had a safety car on the first lap because our Friday qualifying pole sitter ended up in an incident with Daniel Ricciardo, and unfortunately it was Big Rick who was at fault there, and will take a 3-place grid penalty into what is his final race for McLaren in Abu Dhabi, and also could be his final race in F1 for the time being, or will be the final race in F1 for the time being. No news on his future just yet, but unfortunately for Magnussen, that was not a good way to end the weekend that had seen such a high for them. And Ricciardo too, he was just on the cusp of the top 10. I think P11 he was coming out of in the Grand Prix, so that was going to be such an important weekend, or such an important race for McLaren as well, with their fight with Alpine. But as you'll go on and hear me talk about, it was not the case at all for the team in Papaya. So had a safety car out early, then a bunch of chaos on the restart. You had Hamilton going to pass Verstappen and ended up clashing at turn 2 at the center S's, and Max was given a 5-second time penalty. Now, on first watching, when you're watching live and you watch the initial replays as well, you kind of wonder, hey, how's Max at fault there? He was entitled to that corner because he was ahead, but the way that the new rules of engagement in 2022, what the stewards and the race directors have clamped down on, or have revised as such, to make everything a bit more black and white, was the fact that, if the cars have to be even at the apex of the corner, or it's the car behind's fault if there's an incident. So the fact that the way that the center S's work, it's effectively a chicane, but it's still turn 1 and turn 2, and they're looked at different as separate corners. So while Verstappen was ahead, you could say, I think it was, one of them was ahead going into turn 1 when Hamilton tried to make the move. The cars were not alongside each other, and Verstappen could have got the crisscross, but he was still behind Hamilton when they got to the apex of the corner. So that's how they deemed, or the apex of turn 2, and that's how they deemed him to be at fault there, because he was still behind, or behind the where they deem you need to be for a pass to be valid, or in the case of the incident, that they would say it was a racing incident. So figure that one out for yourself. I know it's black and white and everything, but it seems very silly in the context of a chicane, for example. Like if it was 2 left-hand corners or 2 right-hand corners, or there was a big gap between corners, then it's cut and dry and it's obvious. But for a chicane like that, even though they're classed as 2 separate corners, I mean, what did you want Max to do? Did you want him to back off, and have whoever was behind him at the time to rear-end him, or, cut across the chicane and end up on the runoff, and then there would be a whole nother controversy in terms of that. So it was a bit harsh, I think, in that instance, but, they made the decision. Red Bull's race was compromised. Hamilton was able to carry on his way. Not that it was Hamilton's fault either, I mean, I think he gave a decent amount of racing room, but then again, these guys seem to bring out the worst in each other when we see them, and you would have thought that, now 12 months or almost 12 months after the events of last year's season finale at Abu Dhabi, they could have got on, but I don't think that's going to be the case. So, and this is not me blaming anyone or trying to dig up old wounds or, past blame and all that stuff. I mean, people are so sensitive to that still, which is frustrating in its own respect, because there's a bigger perspective and a bigger fight on our hands anyway than just going after the other team. Like, you can criticize Max and Red Bull for 100 other reasons this season than having to go back into last year and dig that sort of stuff up. So that's something that I will go touch on a bit later as well. But yeah, that's how that panned out. Then we had Leclerc on the same lap as well of the safety car restart get sent into the wall by Lando Norris at turn 6. Unfortunately, Lando at fault there. He didn't have a great weekend, but he got a 5-second time penalty as well. Leclerc, lucky for him, he was able to get out and carry on. I don't think they had to change a front wing either, given the way that he was wedged into that wall. And pretty much from there, the race just descended into a strategic game of chess. So Carlos Sainz, first of the leaders to come in on lap 18 to switch over to the medium tyre. Switch off the medium tyre, I think it was. No, I'm getting it all wrong. Sorry, guys. But yeah, he was quicker on the soft tyre anyway. So I think he was on the medium tyre and then went over to the soft. So, Ferrari did quite well on the soft tyre as well this weekend. Checo came in on lap 24 and then Russell, the race leader, on lap 25. Hamilton stayed out the longest in that first stint and he was in on lap 30. And really, Mercedes on either tyre were unstoppable out there. They just had the pace. Hamilton was able to pick off the likes of Perez and Sainz, but then was brought in for an early second stop while Russell had stayed out, so he was a bit confused and annoyed about that, though then Checo in the final stint ended up being exposed on the medium tyre. So we had another safety car because poor old Lando, who's not had like a bad enough weekend already with the food poisoning and all, succumbed to a technical gremlin on his car, so a double McLaren DNF, and that pretty much left Checo exposed at that point when he was on the medium tyre, and you had both Ferraris, Fernando Alonso as well, on the soft tyres in the final stint after the safety car, so he was able to he just dropped to 7th, and this is where a bit of criticism and controversy came in as well against Max Verstappen, because Red Bull had issued a team order for him to let his teammate Checo pass to take 6th. It's not like they're fighting for a podium or a race win, and the championship is all but done for Verstappen and also for Red Bull as well. So it's about getting that second in the Drivers' Championship for Red Bull, because apparently I got my stats wrong and didn't know that Mark Webber didn't finish second in 2011. So Red Bull have never had a 1-2 in the championship before. So this could be the year that they do it. But Max didn't want to yield, even though it was just for P6. He said he would give his reasons later. There's been much discussion and conjecture over what those reasons might be. Something to do with Monaco and Checo crashing on purpose or whatever. I have no idea, to be honest. But still, if I was Max's teammate, I'd be equally miffed, because given how much help, Perez has given Max, you look back to last year and then specifically Abu Dhabi as well, the Minister for Defence, they labelled him. And then this year as well, in many instances, don't even need to name them. Like, I mean, what is this, an essay or something that I have to cite my references? Everyone knows what Checo's done for Max. Yet Max just decides, nah, it's all about me. It's all about me. I mean, that's unacceptable. And if this is him getting even for something that happened early in the season, good on him. At least we know what his character's like now too. So the bit of harmony I thought that there was in Red Bull between those two. I mean, Max is definitely your number one driver, your golden child and everything. And then his perfect foil is Checo because he just does what he needs to. He's been taking the points. He's the one who's the strategic scapegoat in every instance, in a nice way, not like, Ferrari used to butcher their second driver's time. But, Checo's been compliant all the way, so what's this going to do in terms of 2023? I mean, naturally, I think that, perhaps Checo is coming to the end of his career, maybe another season or two. But, if there's more fireworks like this, if I was Perez, I'd be like, you know what? I've done what I needed to. I've got some race wins under my belt. Didn't get the championship, never been in contention, and made a lot of money. I've got a family. Yeah, Max, you do what you need to. You're a complete... I don't want to... I'm going to say, Max, you're a complete psycho. You please yourself, okay? I don't have time for this. So that's the mentality I would have if I was Perez going into next year and, after this instance. But we'll see. Max supposedly says that in Abu Dhabi he will ensure that Checo finishes P2 in the championship. If he needs to pass him, he will let him. So we'll see what happens. Otherwise, I don't think we're going to ever hear about, what really happened in Monaco and stuff like that. And, if it is true that, he crashed on purpose in Monaco to not let Max out-qualify him, then, it just goes down in history along with the Schumacher story and the Rosberg case and all those other stories. I wouldn't put it into like, Crashgate or whatever, but there's one thing after another with the Red Bull team. I mean, just enough of it already, please. Fernando Alonso moving on. So we had the Ferraris finish in third and fourth, another podium for Carlos Sainz. Good job. He's been the stronger of the Ferrari pair, I feel like, this second half of the season. And, to be fair, he was strong last year too when Ferrari weren't as competitive. So perhaps, all the pressure got to Leclerc earlier this season and now it's kind of just, faded away as Ferrari's form has faded away too. But good on Sainz for doing a great job. I want him to be up there next year if Ferrari can get their act together. Alonso finishing in fifth, which was a great result for him considering you look at where Alpine were as a team following the sprint race on Saturday. Neither of them in the points. Alonso cops a post-race penalty and falls close to the back of the grid because of him trying to crash into his teammate, or he did crash into his teammate, and they got together on a couple of occasions, did Alonso and Ocon. It got a bit fiery and to the point where afterwards they needed a good talking to by their team boss, Otmar Safnauer. And Alonso saying things like, well, I only have to deal with it for one more race. So, goes to show you how far Alonso's come in his career if he's still making clashes like that. And Ocon as well, there's no, he's not clean either, given how much friction there was between him and Perez going back to their Force India days. So, how's it going to be next year when he and Gasly get together and they already don't like each other? So that'll be an interesting one to watch. Hopefully it means less points for Alpine and McLaren can do a better job in terms of their car performance. But Alpine rebounding from where they were in the sprint race. Three-stop strategy on Alonso's side, which was very ornate or very unthought of in that instance, but it got him to P5, Ocon P8, so they both scored points and it's all but done. I think you could say the battle for fourth in the constructors between them and McLaren. Pretty unlikely that McLaren can overturn a 19-point deficit in the last race unless they were to do a 1-2 and Alpine didn't score any points, or at least finish or win the race and Alpine didn't score any points. So, that's disappointing in that respect. But Alpine have had the faster car all year. They haven't been the most consistent with reliability or their drivers. but or incidents, as a matter of fact. So, the fact that McLaren have pushed them, or let's say Lando Norris has pushed them to this final point of the season, shows how good the driver is. And, also I think if they had the points on Ricciardo's side of the garage, they could have easily finished fourth as well. So that's another topic of debate for next time. Valtteri Bottas, in the points again. Alfa Romeo looked nowhere at the end of qualifying and then in the sprint race, but, Bottas seemed to got along really well in the race and scoring a couple of points. And it's just a nice little buffer, get an extra couple of points ahead of Aston Martin. So there's 5 points difference between those two. Lance Stroll ended up scoring in 10th ahead of his teammate Sebastian Vettel. And who was as high as P4 as well at one stage of the race. So, good on Seb, one race for him to go in his F1 career. And I did a little Instagram post the other day, just a little appreciation post for Seb, with some old pictures, of course, going back to 2013. One of him at Red Bull that I had as he was doing autographs here in Melbourne, and then 2019 at one of the season launch in Ferrari kit, then 2020 as well, just before COVID, did the driver portraits. And then, of course, I got one of him this year as well in Aston Martin kit, but unfortunately he was wearing a mask, so I didn't quite get his whole face. But yeah, it's still there. It's quite nice. Go check it out on my Instagram if you're following. If not, the link is in the Linktree to this podcast. So, but we need to talk about Lance Stroll, and I had a good rant about this on Grid Talk show after qualifying as well. He did the same thing he did to Fernando Alonso in Austin, although it wasn't as catastrophic, thankfully, where he turns late, he changed a direction really late to cover off his teammate Vettel, who's coming down the left-hand side, grass, 2 wheels on the grass, and, a fence on his left-hand side as well. And, how that didn't end up in an accident was something that was, got to say few, that nothing worse happened. But if Gasly is, 2 points off a race ban, because of the penalty point system or whatever, then that's unacceptable, because Stroll in the space of 3 races has done, made this stupid mistake where it warrants a race ban just for him to learn a lesson. Because, it's not the first time he's done it, and it's not going to be the last time he does it. When is someone going to get seriously injured as a result of this? So what are they going to say after that? What's Stroll going to say after that? It's unacceptable in my eyes. So not going to give it any more air, but, that's my feelings on it. Yeah, like, if the dude doesn't care, then he shouldn't be in F1. It's not, a kid's toy set or something where, there's no consequences or whatever. There needs to be consequences. And as well, just, a point about, that I made in the Grid Talk show as well, without using these exact words, is that I feel like there needs to be consequences for his performance. Look at poor Mick Schumacher, who's now out of a seat, breaking news, for next year, because, he couldn't quite cut it this year, involved in too many crashes, and didn't quite get the performance out of the car and the results that was expected of him at a back of the field team like Haas. What is there for Stroll when he crashes all the time and can't keep up with his teammate? You look at Vettel, 36 points to Stroll's 14. There's not going to be no consequences for him because the dad runs the team, of course. So that's the thing about accountability that really annoys me with Stroll, is that there's none. There's absolutely none. Yet, we've got poor Mick Schumacher, who will be sitting on the sidelines next year, potentially in a Mercedes reserve gig. Who knows? And he was doing all right too in the race. He faded late in the race despite being in the top 10. So he could have flown the flag for Haas, but didn't quite eventuate. And yeah, that kind of sums up the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. Congratulations to George Russell on his first win of the season. Now we've got one race to go. Looking forward to Abu Dhabi. Could Lewis Hamilton's record of no winless seasons in F1 stand as well? Last chance for him. Could be a little bit of redemption, I think, for Abu Dhabi last year if he's able to win. There's also the question of the Red Bull fallout as well. Effectively, they're on tied points as Leclerc and Perez, so Checo will need to beat him, outscore him this weekend to be able to get that P2 in the championship. Max Verstappen as well, he's 137 points clear at the top, so he still has a chance to get to that 155 point gap between first and second to break that record that Sebastian Vettel set back in 2013. So that will be interesting to see if he can do that. Like I said, Mick Schumacher unfortunately out next year. It is quite sad, but at the same time, Schumacher, the way he has performed, I think, as much as we would have all loved to have had that dream situation where he did well and he could follow in his father's footsteps, it wasn't going to happen to that degree, but unfortunately he hasn't even shown that he's capable of, scoring points on a basis where he's expected on a level that he's expected to at Haas. So, I feel like F1 perhaps is not where his future lies. He could, do really well in sports cars and everything beyond F1, so we'll see. But out of the options that Haas had, really, that they put on the table, it was him, Giovinazzi, and Nico Hülkenberg, who's got the seat. We get Hülkenberg, 12.0 for the millionth time or whatever. I would have still given the shot to Schumacher because, if anything, he's got all this room to improve for next season. He's already with the team. He's helped, you'd like to think he's helped develop that car as well over the last couple of years, or at least in this year since they've had a new car. So, at worst, it would be the same as what we've seen this year. But, there is all the more to gain. Whereas with Hülkenberg, it's a known quantity. It's a very conservative choice. It's been a couple of years or 3 years since he's been in a full-time seat. And, I was a fan of Hülkenberg. Like, I am a fan of Nico Hülkenberg. But I feel like, sometimes you've got to call it a day. And the fact that, he has that unenviable record of, most races without a podium, like, something's got to give with that. Sure, he's talented and everything, but he didn't quite get the job done when he had the tools to be able to do it. And I'm going back to Force India 2012. Renault, like, he wasn't there in 2020 when Ricciardo and Ocon were able to score some podiums in that car. So, it just shows, I guess, he's there, he's up there, but he's not quite, in that upper echelon. And while Mick is not going to be there either, at least he's someone you can easily, rely on, or the fact that he's been there. I just don't know. Anyway, good on him. We've got a good lineup between, it's a reliable lineup between him and Magnussen next year. If they don't score points like they're expecting, then, we can all dig into Hülkenberg next year. That's just the way the cookie crumbles, I guess. A lot of people have short memories, I feel like, when it comes to F1. So, I'm sure we'll forget about it and move on. Anyway, so that's all to look forward to in Abu Dhabi. Last race weekend, of course, of the year for F1. And then for me personally, I think if you watch, supercars, we've still got the Adelaide 500 coming in a couple of weeks, and that'll kind of be my last race weekend as well for the season. So, it's all coming to an end. Be happy to have a little break as well, just reset, reflect, look forward to 2023, and that's what MotoGP is doing at the moment as well, because we had the finale in Valencia a couple of weeks ago. Great season, and the decider, of course, with Pecco Bagnaia overturning a 90-plus point gap in the championship to win his first title. First Ducati rider to win since Casey Stoner back in 2007, and also Italian rider on an Italian bike, which is something I think Giacomo Agostini accomplished on board an Aprilia or an Augusta. I'm not sure, back in the heyday of the sport. So really good result for them. And I mean, no one's ever overturned a gap that big. And this is going back to the German Grand Prix just before the mid-season break. So that was where the gap was at its biggest. Fabio Quartararo looked like he was on top of the world, but then Pecco comes back, 7 wins in total to Quartararo's 3. Yamaha, the bike is just in a state of decline, still lacks that power, and then only 2 podium finishes in the second half of the year for Quartararo is quite disappointing. And, they just renegotiated a new deal earlier this year, a few races into the season, where it potentially looked like Fabio would walk, but he ended up staying. And what if he's regretting that now, because it doesn't look like there is much promise for next year? Oh, sorry, big yawn. It doesn't look like there's a lot of promise for next year. Probably looks a bit better than Honda's outlook anyway. We'll get to that a little bit later. But, Yamaha as a whole was so bad this year that Frankie Morbidelli, who is Quartararo's teammate, of course he's been struggling since that knee injury last year. He was P19 in the championship, and that's aboard a factory bike, a factory Yamaha bike. These guys were at the top. Going back a few years ago, Jorge Lorenzo, Valentino Rossi, when they were teammates, and then even the first couple of years when Maverick Vinales was there too. No wonder Vinales decided to pack his bags and leave. It's been entertaining watching that MotoGP Unlimited series at the moment, which is on Disney Plus here in Australia, because you get to see all that controversy between Vinales and Yamaha last season. And then, of course, he's only had 1 top 10 finish this year, and that was in the last race, and Valencia did Frankie. So, and I feel so bad for Frankie, because I love Morbidelli. He finished second in the championship in 2020, and that was on the satellite Petronas SRT, the Sepang Racing Team bike. You had Andrea Dovizioso, who was on the RNF satellite Yamaha, who, RNF taking over from the Petronas team. And he didn't even race the full season, decided, yep, I'm retiring after my home race in Misano. And then they brought Cal Crutchlow back, and he did a few races and didn't really do much. You had Darren Binder as well, who's been pretty anonymous all season. There you go. I couldn't tell you what his best result was either. So, Yamaha as a whole, just, it's quite sad, their state. And then you want to talk about Honda. I guess Marc Marquez, after the Valencia test, post-season test, giving an ultimatum almost, saying that he feels ready to win, but Honda or not. The Honda, if I need to make a step in my fitness in the off-season, Honda need to make 2 steps. And this is their champion. This is Marc Marquez, who dominated the sport since he came in 2013. He won every single championship up to 2020, except for 2015. 6-time Premier Class champion. And, Honda have kind of gone to ruin without him there, so that'll be interesting to see what they do next year. Of course, they will benefit from 2 Suzuki refugees in the form of world champion from 2020, Juan Mir, and then, of course, Alex Rins as well, who will go to the LCR team with Taka Nakagami. And just sad in general that Suzuki is going to no longer be on the grid, or they're finished in MotoGP. Alex Rins giving him 2 wins in the last 3 races, 1 at Phillip Island here, and then, of course, the fairy tale final race for Suzuki, winning there in Valencia. So hopefully they'll benefit the Honda program, and Mir on the Repsol Honda with Marquez. That should be a good combination, because Marquez's teammates since Dani Pedrosa left have been pretty shocking, and not in the sense that they've got no talent, but the fact that, after Pedrosa left, or, after Pedrosa was in his prime, you had Jorge Lorenzo come in, who, the Ducati spell didn't quite work out, though. he did score a couple of wins there and was looking really good, but was just nowhere in that year with Repsol Honda. Then they had Alex Marquez, Mark's younger brother, come in. It was going to be a miracle if he would perform. And then Paul Espargaro for the last 2 years. I would have thought that, we would have seen more from Paul, but, it didn't quite work out for him either. So someone like Mir, who is a world champion, he's young, he, is consistent, as we saw in the 2020 season where, he won one race and still won the championship. Hopefully, he can be the one as well as Marquez to turn their fate around. Jack Miller going off to KTM too, so no longer on the factory Ducati bike. He'll be at the factory KTM with Brad Binder. And we'll see Enea Bastianini, who after 4 wins this season on the Gresini Ducati bike, step up to the factory team in 2023, and he was 3rd overall as well in the championship. So that'll be interesting, the dynamic between him and Bagnaia. I think, Bastianini will be someone who will be quite ambitious and wanting to win straight away, but Miller and Bagnaia, their dynamic was quite good. I really enjoyed watching them two together, even though I would have liked to have seen Miller a bit more successful on the Ducati, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles. And Ducati, just like Ferrari, showing that they're quite ruthless when it comes to making decision on driver lineups and whatnot. So yeah, that's pretty much it anyway for this one. Looking forward to the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Quick mention as well, bit of disappointment, of course, with the World T20 cricket final, of course, with England and Pakistan there. Obviously me going for Pakistan didn't quite work out, sadly. But they played really well to get to this stage. The fact that, a week before the final they weren't even in contention, but we've got to thank the Dutch. Got to thank the Dutch for something. If you're not a Max Verstappen fan, thank the Dutch for beating South Africa to allow Pakistan the path to come through to the final. And as much as I was hoping for a repeat of the 1992 World Cup final, which was played here in Melbourne, of course, as well, with the famous Imran Khan and Wasim Akram as well. It didn't quite work out, but credit to England. They've been the form team all tournament, and they're the only team in the history of white ball cricket to have both the ODI World Cup trophy and the T20 World Cup trophy, so good on them. Anyway, that's about it. Wrapping it up. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. As I said, find all the relevant links through my Linktree on the Twitter account. It's at Hit the Apex Media. Other than that, I'll see you guys next week to review and wrap the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Thank you.